All right, here we go. We have Sacramento's own Kiii in the building. Producer, artist, rapper, and creative of all trades. How are you doing today, man?
I'm blessed, Josh, man. How you feeling?
I've been doing all right so far. Like I've been
Mhm.
checking out your recent single, like Wonder Why. It's actually like very like interesting too with the song and all that, and just with the production and the layout, and just even like having that chance to like work on like an editorial piece, like for my platform. It's very interesting and all that. And then you have a great background in music, by the way, too. With your other previous releases
Yeah.
with Drug Dealers X, Time Machine, Ski Mask in '97, Die for Me, and then your other singles with like Black is God, with Watchers, with King Los, and then the entire single Black is God with Casey Veggies and all that. So you have a good list, by the way. And just reading your story on your father being like a producer, and then I think your stepfather like working with like the digital underground, like with the engineering stuff. It's interesting too. And then like even going to school in UCLA, and then like performing on the side like in
Yeah.
LA too, just like around the areas and all that, and like building your music career from there. Like it's very interesting in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. It's been a journey, and there's a lot of lore behind it. A lot of things I'm still learning about my past and who was involved. And I was always like a studio baby, so it's a beautiful growth for me at this point. Kind of see
Yeah.
where I came from.
Yeah, most definitely.
Mhm.
So this is like your first time here on the platform, and I just want to talk with this first question now right here. So, growing up in Sacramento, which area did you grow up by, like in the city, and what was like the environment like for you growing up? Would you say like your childhood was very great, or would it be like very different in that sense?
Yeah, so I've lived in various areas throughout Sacramento, south, north. Those are like the most notable spaces in Sacramento. I mean, you have West Sacramento as well, but I've been all over. So I've seen a lot of aspects of Sacramento culture, pretty much the complete picture of it, even historically, just knowing what Sacramento represents, notably to Black culture. For me, I get asked this as far as like upbringing because I have a very particular path that I've like walked. My mom, when she had me, she was studying statistics on like how to raise a Black man in America. And so she would look at, uh, 2 out of 3 Black men will be incarcerated by age 21. She was looking at these things very early on and trying to find, strategies and maneuvering. So if it was like extracurricular programs, if it was like community service, which she's heavy in that, um, as well as just like different things that like nurtured my imagination. I think that was pretty much what separated, but it was far from easy, especially the path that I decided to take, being the first generational student in college, right? I think, I was born in a split household, in a blended family. And so, tons of therapy that I've gotten from those experiences that I've had to, encounter on my own,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think also environmentally, Sacramento's notable for its gang culture, and it's a little distinct from LA gang culture, right? I think the the issue or the challenge for me was never really like trying to fit in. Like I've always understood certain people's point of views of whether they were bred into gang culture, it was in their family, or if it was protection, or if it was just like straight up peer pressure, because it was a lot of that too, where I didn't really see the need. And I think because I was fostered so much creatively, I just questioned everything. I questioned everything. I was always like a radical skepticist. So I think I kind of decided to carve my own path. And I think that mindset saved me from jumping into these things because it could have been an easy decision to do it. It was all around me. I decided to go to college at a certain point in time at age 16, and there were plenty of times, where it reflected in my grades, if that makes sense, where it'd be tons of fights that I got into until I made a particular shift.
Yeah.
So I think just the mindset and maybe a lot of my mom's work has most definitely guided me in this path towards like not becoming a product of Sacramento.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, most definitely in that sense. I know like with Sacramento, like it's the capital of California in that sense too. So you have like the whole like city council, and then also like with the state, with the governor and all that. So I don't know, like even back then, if the city or like the state, like in that sense too, did whatever to like prevent, gang violence and like crime like around the area in that sense too. Like I don't know if there was like previous like policies or setup systems to kind of reduce the amount, or was it like the same like ever since like in the 90s?
I've seen so it's interesting that you bring that up. I tell you doing your research for sure. I was a part of so many programs. I was part of the youth council for the city council, and it was interesting. I've met plenty of council members. I've met mayors. I've gotten acknowledgement from these spaces. However, I think there were efforts, right? But I think some of them were very similar to like Reaganomics, right? Where you see what was it? I think it was a law that was passed with like drive-bys. I think that did it did some work, but I think it also did some adverse damage where I've seen, like, I have family members who are still doing time for mistakes where people didn't even, lose their life out of a situation and facing 25 to life. Um, and it's just tough, it's tough watching something where you see policy impact, your loved ones, and so I do think that at this point, from what I'm witnessing, Sacramento has a lot of work to do, and there's just not enough resources that nurture, and we're speaking implicitly my environment, the Black mind, the Black youth. um, and I don't really think I think policy would help, but it's more of a cultural fabric thing. I think it's more of like a programming thing here
Yeah.
that we're dealing with.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I know Sacramento too back then, like it was sort of big for music too, like now and also like with the past too. I know that there were like two main artists like before like the whole hype like this year, like within like the new year that kind of brought like Sacramento in. So like Sibo and then brother Lin Chung. So Sibo
Mhm.
actually worked with Tupac before like in his old music and all that. And then I think when we get into like the like mid to like late 20 like tens and early 2020s, it sort of grew with like Mozzie and Shooter Gang Coney and Noni Blanco, and I think also Shooter Gang Jojo. So like I think those are like the relevant people like around the area like at that time too. And then also I think CML lavish D for some reason too. So, in your opinion, was it a big place for music growing up in terms of being like an industry city, or was it only an epicenter for local talent only?
Sacramento's always held that title as a local talent epicenter. I think there just isn't a healthy circuit for thriving artists. I mean, take it for example, the artist Briss, who you may have seen or heard of, right? Like he was getting to a certain point, but I don't think that the culture has fostered a healthy professional circuit for artists, and that's inspired me, right? We do have the Sebos, the Brother Lynches, right? The T Nutties, um, where it's rich in culture, and we are very distinct from Bay Area musical culture. I think for some time before the 2010s, Bay Area was a heavy influence. You're talking about the hyphen movement. So I've seen how all of that's translated, over to Sacramento. I do think though that the musical culture of Sacramento is like, it has like a certain sense of latency. So we from what I've seen, like we kind of take our time growing or evolving sonically. You'll hear the same kind of sounds for a couple of years, but then once you see that shift, it's a dramatic change in where we're going. And we've actually influenced a lot of other cultures as well. So everyone that you've mentioned, I for sure I'd say has created a lane, a professional lane for us. The ones before, the ones in the modern space, the CMLs, the Mozzies for sure has created a place where at least Sacramento has been acknowledged, but I wouldn't say that it's like a place where you can professionally grow. And
Yeah, no, most
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Because I know like one of the biggest artists like right now, like Sweetie, some people don't even know that she's even from Sacramento in that sense too, and like unless you hear the music fully. And with me, like I don't really see her like a Sacramento artist like that, because like with Sacramento artists, I think they have a unique like sound and style that they like follow through. So like even with the Mozzies, the CML Lavish D's, the like Noni Blancos, the I think Stunner Girl's also from Sacramento too and all that. So it's kind of like you kind of see that unique aspect. I think with Sweetie, I think she's like the only one that kind of blew up like crazy there, and even making a name for herself there, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, she's most definitely yeah, she's people don't know, I don't think, because you just don't expect an artist to come from a city like Sacramento for whatever reason. I think
yeah,
culturally kind of distinguish both. We don't really couple, this artist is from Sacramento, they're known, or they're like putting it on the map type stuff. I think Mozzie is and CML have done like that kind of work of putting Sacramento on the map per se. But yeah,
yeah,
it's true. We're very eclectic. We're very independent. I think just the mindset of a Sacramento artist. There's something unique about that because we're like a melting pot of cultures, where we also are very okay with leading and kind of having that independence from the Bay Area. I think there's like that bravado, right? Where they're like our cousins. So
yeah.
it's a beautiful relationship, but I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
potential.
Yeah, most definitely. I know that we've that the history and everything else was like talked about, as well as like your musical background and history. But what inspired you to take your craft seriously into like the next level?
Yeah, so I think as I kind of mentioned, that dreaming, that nurturing of being able to dream, and like the imagination that I have has done it. I grew up always wanting to be the best rapper alive. Like, I'll probably be the most competitive artist rapper you'll meet, because even just that dream is so vain. It's had to mature from that point. It's not sustainable as an artist to have that as the reason, but it's most definitely lasted like a solid 10 years in my path of just kind of wanting that for myself, competitively, wanting to sharpen my lyrics, and my taste in music, and kind of blending both. That's what I think really makes me unique, because it's hard to really put me in the box in that space. I think at that point, when that didn't really last as long, it became more about when I went to college, being more for the people. I studied African American studies and music history, so I got to see the different genres. I got to see the exploitation in Black culture. So I created, you know, uh, I, especially at UCLA, where you have like Bunchy Carter, you seeing like Angela Davis teaching there. It's just such a landmark for civil rights, and looking at it from a modern lens, right? Where I think that that fueled me for some time. Where no longer was about being the best rapper. It was like, what can I do for the people, right? And then how can I express myself at like the highest medium as a Black man in the position that I'm in? And I've grown from that. I don't think that's no longer sustainable. I think right now it's like, um, how can I reach like my creative heights, and the competitive nature is like more so professional, at
Yeah,
this point. So now I'm looking at the record labels. Now I'm looking at like, royalties, and competing from a sense of like ownership, competing from a sense of maintaining my mental health, my sanity in the game, because I've just seen so many people lose track. And I'm obviously motivated by creating paths and other opportunities for other Black youth in the music industry and outside of that, because now it's kind of turning into a few other things as well.
yeah. No, most definitely. And like you even like cited your influences within that sense on that musical aspect with Jay-Z, with Tupac, with Pusha T, with Kendrick Lamar, like in that sense too. But like in terms of like wanting to work with other people someday too, who would you like to work with that you haven't worked with yet?
Yeah, I just feel like I feel like I've been such a late bloomer in this, because it's just been such a process. I'm so hands-on, that I've like taken a very particular route. And so I think I've become a little bit more abundant, and on my album there's only one feature that I'm dropping right now, right? I mean, the other two features are what they are, but I think that for sure. Like the dreamer in me, like the hip hop rapper in me, for sure would really love to go and make a record with like Push, for sure. I think maybe you've even mentioned them, you know, a few of them, right? Like Tech Nine, I've seen that in the article. J. Cole, for sure. Like I'm all down for like what Dreamville is doing. I feel like they're very hungry. Freddie Gibbs, for sure. I feel like Freddie Gibbs is really up there. I feel like if he drops one more album, he'll make it in my top 5 all time. And that's just me personally. You know, I think he's someone that's musically done it and he takes the craft seriously. So that's someone I would like to see myself going, you know, toe to toe with on a record. Tyler the Creator, I feel like that dude is he's just grown so much, but what he's blossomed into is just very interesting, you know, from a sonic point of view. He's always been kind of behind the keyboard and just the level of production, style of production. I'd say Griselda. And then if it came down to like what I felt like I would get the best out of, I think maybe a Dr. Dre, for sure. Working with a Dr. Dre or Pharrell. I know you just mentioned artists, but I think they're most definitely artists, right? In their own right. And Kanye, for sure. Yeah. I think, and Jay, but I think they may retire by the time I get to the point. So I've kind of had to come to terms, you know, with where I'm at and what's the landscape of things. But you know, that's just like the dreamer in me.
Yeah, most definitely. I know that you have your latest single out right now, Wonder Why. Like it's been released for a while. To speak more on that, what was like that whole process and inspiration, like creatively, for that song in that sense?
Yeah, so somebody had asked me that recently, and I remember I was like going through my notes because it just varies. I've dropped over 20 works in my lifetime, like probably 25. And so I've seen so many different approaches, you know, and I curate from an album perspective. So I'm like, what fits in this album pretty much, you know, essentially. I'm never really just dropping singles or doing singles. It's never kind of like that. I'm like, what fits best in this album? And so I think when I found it, you know, the producer for sure, like I think he's from Russia. And he's a good dude, you know, because most of my producers and most of my production is coming from out the country, whether it be like Amsterdam, whether it be Germany. Some of these dudes just like they watched hip hop grow. They want to participate and they're doing so well. And so when I heard it, my approach and Wonder Why specifically was, you know, I try to avoid nowadays not writing. You know, like I'll do like off the top, and I think I did off the top in this one. I think I wrote a few bars. When somebody asked me, I looked it up because I usually have it in my notes. I'm like, I wrote like 4 bars of the song, and then I think from there I just kind of, especially towards the you know the later end when my voice kind of the inflection changes. I think I was really experimenting as well with my voice. I've been doing a lot of that, especially in this album, and I think that was like the birth of that sound of mine. But I'm very hands-on. So, you know, shout out to DJ Kamari, Shot Archives, who has been my videographer for quite some time, and then my new videographer, 777 Cinema. I'm very hands-on. I direct, I storyboard. I've done some mixing. I mixed all of Ski Mask in 97. I produce most of Ski Mask in 97. So I'm extremely hands-on. I try to be as hands-on as possible. But in this record particularly, I mean, it was all due to the producer. Outside of that, you know, I think that just the meaning of the song is like, you know, a lot of the times we get so infuriated with the state of the culture where we are right now. We do like a lot of lash outs when things happen with when we talk about like the financial acumen and it being managed well and Black artistry. Me, it's like we wonder why, you know. I'm like, everybody got a foreign, you know, me, I'm whipping Toyota, but if I want it, I afford it, you know, and I'm not, you know, I'm not making that the main focal point of what my flex is, you know, and that's not really where I'm placing value at when it comes to being an artist, you know. And I mean, yeah, you know, I got rings and whatever the case may be, but that's purely me, you know. And I think from that's just my expression, right? We wonder why we are where we are, you know. But, you know, I think you may know it. I think I mentioned it before, but, you know, I mixed at the age of 16. You know, I built my own computer at that age. And then from there, I was dropping mixtapes, you know, like a madman. And then throughout college, you know, my approach has always kind of morphed into creating demos. You know, I reference track my own stuff at times. And even I'll bring lines to the session. So it just really varies. You know, some of the times I'll just go off the top. I think likely the song that I just dropped recently was off the top. But what you'll hear in this album is like me back on my pen for sure.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And so that song's actually going to be on your upcoming album that's going to be released soon called Reap What You Sow. I don't want to speak, too much on it, like you don't have to give it all away, but what can fans expect for this project? And will it be like kind of like different from like the other projects that you've released so far in that sense?
Yeah, I think what I was aiming for in my previous and any of my projects, I'm getting out of this. I think maybe more so because of my capacity to be able to finance it, independently. I think it's the best that I could have done uh, ever up to this point, and I'm speaking from a sense, like when I play it to people I'm close to, you're most definitely going to take away, at least from the people that really support, because I don't have like the craziest supporting audience, but the ones that like rock with me heavy, and I see them all the time. They're always there. They're always like just so seamless, very supportive, and very selfless. And we do have that connection, so I know at least for them, they'll be getting exactly what they want. It's like a 10 piece, but there are a lot of surprises within that threaded in it. There is a feature with O Finesse. Those may not know who he is, but I'll do a lot of the introduction when I drop for sure. But I think with this, this is a lot more personal. A lot of all of my other works, if you pay attention, they're pretty guarded. But throughout, I think I started this December 2020 is like the first or the most like latest song that I started on, which is Target Practice. And from that point, me doing therapy, COVID, pandemic, pretty much that's like the amalgamation of where I've been at. I've also been doing a lot of growth, like last year I went back to school to complete a degree in IT. So like it's been a lot of twists and turns, with me deciding what songs fit in the album. But right now it's mixed down, I got one more song to mix. Very personal records. Some of them are very fun. Some of them like hard hitters. And then I just think it's like the most cohesive project I've ever had, where I think it's very seamless. I think I intended on being able to play it through for the people that like actually like listen and tap into what I do.
Yeah, most definitely. And like when I was like thinking over like on the creative process and everything else too, you mentioned that you used to write before, but like on Wonder Why you like freestyled like off the dome in that sense too. But in terms of your creative process, like when making music just like out of like the random, like what's that process like, and what would like a day in the studio be like for you in that sense?
Yeah, they're fun, and I'm not like I don't like, I'm very intentional in my studio sessions, whether it's external, like I do all of my recording solo. I do all my recording, well, not solo, but I do all of my recording by myself. I hit the record button, all of it. And then I send it out to DJ Kamari, who does all the mixing, and then we have a mastering engineer. So it's like a very sacred process for me. I quit smoking like almost 5 years ago. So I don't, I'll sip some wine, I'll sip some coffee to do like some retouching. But I think right now, I'll do like a first layer, and then I'll just keep going back and forth. Like I study Dr. Dre and how he does it, and it's nowhere close. Like I'm trying to learn from what they're doing, as much as I can without being involved in these circles of like how to maximize like the expression. And I think that's really what I've been aiming to do in this project for sure. And really what's been my process is not to just drop it one take, when I could do one takes, I can do that all I want, but like I always go back and I carve and I perfect the inflections, and how I choose to express, I think, is important at this point, and how it's interpreted. So without giving too much of the recipe, I think that sometimes when I'm doing the bar for bar, like Wonder Why, it's like punching in.
Yeah.
It's a very seamless thing. It's kind of weird almost. But then I'll have records where it's like flowing out of me written wise, and then I'll just do a whole take like that because I got the breath for it. So yeah, and outside of that, I do a lot of layering. I do dubs, I do all of it. I try to I do all of the arrangements as well. So like when I deal with these producers, a lot of them are online. So I'll go and I'll interface with them and I'll say, hey, can you send me this, get the stems, arrange it however I feel is the best way. So it's a complete original rather than me competing with other artists who might get a license, right?
Yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely. To speak more on like the other questions too, so you managed to work with King Los, Black Metaphor, and like Kiii Veggies for your past singles like Black is God and Watchers. How did that come about, and how was that experience like working with them? What advice did they give you on becoming successful in the industry and such?
Yeah. So most of the transaction was digital, right? But ironically, like I met King Los. He most definitely does not know this, but I met King Los like maybe 10 years ago during college at like a BET Awards event, like some kind of after party. And I remember like freestyling with a few of the people that I used to rap with at the time. And we were like just spitting with him, and it was very, very dope experience. Now I never forgot who he was from that point. Um, and so I've always had this level of admiration for his story, being from Baltimore and like just how vicious he is, because the dude is vicious and he could freestyle. So like I could also freestyle, like off the top. But he's like just a different beast, and he's mastered that art of just going off the top and thinking on your feet. So I reached out to him, and he laid that verse pretty quickly. And I think, he told me a few things, like he most definitely dropped a few gems about, how challenging of a path it is as an artist. We had a couple conversations. Black Metaphor, I like to be aware of my production style. He was someone that I just felt fit, and we were both like, we have like a very nice chemistry here, and so that was something that we explored at the time. Shout out to Black Metaphor. I learned about him through the Isaiah Rashad track. Rest in peace, Kevin Miller. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah, I've heard it from Sevilla demo. Yeah, it's pretty dope and all that.
Yeah, dope record. And so, from there, it's a few other things I have like in the crates with him, but for whatever reason, it ended up blending perfectly with the Kiii Veggies. I just felt like, and even with him, Kiii, in 2000, during my college days, for sure, like I've known about him for quite some time. Life Changes, that album, I just feel like a very timeless album. Songs like Faces, like I used to bump that shit a lot. So I've always had like admiration for even his timeline and what he's done, and even him sonically. So I reached out to him, and he's just really cool, and he's not even the type of dude to do features. He's not like a feature dude. He's just jumping on anybody. So I know that there was a certain level of like admiration of just like, let's do this, let's explore what this is. And so yeah, I'm very appreciative of these experiences. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. You got your stage name Kiii, like in that sense too, like, sort of like similar to like a car key, like in that sense too, just like with the interesting like similarities with the stuff too. So I want to ask, in your opinion, how did you get your name as a part of your stage name in that sense?
Yeah, so the name is not that old. I at some point, during my college uh street license performing days, I went by the name Truth Dilla. And so I always like, I dropped a lot of projects that were like truth related, because I always felt like I was selling my truth, and it would be like I was homeless on campus. You know, my UCLA experience was not easy. I didn't really have the proper foundation and structure to sustain that level of challenge with tuition fees and just even my habits, you know, being in relationships and managing a whole rap career while being at one of the highest level ranking institutions. And so it became like a me against the institution thing for quite some time. And so, you know, there are times I'll be hungry, you know, and I remember selling my first EP. I sold like hundreds of EPs, you know, and I felt like I was selling my truth. So I always felt like I was like truth dealing. So I always kind of called myself truth dealer, you know, and like truth dealing like that. Like that's the truth, like that nigga, the truth, you know. And so from there, it kind of split and branched off because it became like more self-titled. So Kiii is a self-titled. It's like initially it was like Chi, like Kiii is a Chinese term for life force, you know, but it's a triple entendre, right? So there's just like, you know, a key, like unlocking doors, you know, there's kilo, like selling kilo of truth. You know, for me, I've always kind of played with that. And then, you know, there's 3 eyes. So, you know, I think it's very methodical, very original, of me creating that. I've always liked to take my own narratives into my own hands. So I think that was kind of the me repurposing, you know, who I am from an audience level. If that makes sense.
Yeah, most definitely. I want to talk about that plaque you have like in the behind you, like in that sense too. I know that it was from the digital underground too in that sense too. So tell me more about that backstory, because I know that your stepfather was like sound engineering for them in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a beautiful individual. He most definitely has like played a significant role in you know, his story is a very interesting one, because I think he's always wanted to work with like Michael Jackson. Like that was like his top tier artist that he wanted to work with. So that was like his dream. And although he wasn't able to do that for obvious reasons, and even just his career path, you know, getting married with my mother and different things like that kind of took place where his roles changed and shifted. Um, he, you know, he's worked with Raphael Sadiq, Tony. He's traveled around the world, you know, studio engineering for a lot of these artists, and you know, even working with Pac in his early days. And so, you know, I think that like the perspective, and even my pops, like they were all in that circuit, because you know, Pac was very like heavily into Oakland and Northern California, had that relationship with Digital Underground, so everybody knew everyone, you know. And so for sure, like I think that you know, from what I hear in a lot of his sessions, I was actually in a lot of his studio sessions out post those moments. Like I'm talking early 2000s when I first was introduced to my stepfather. I'd be in the studio with him, you know, and that was a very familiar reality for me, even prior to him. And I was with my pops or, you know, my other uncle, and I've had like a very strong connection with just the studio life. And so I'd say it's in my DNA. I know for him, this is his own unique experiences. I know it's something he doesn't brag about, but it is something that he has a lot of pride in, as he should, because, you know, a lot of these records did numbers. You know, we're talking Tony, Raphael Sadiq. Um, so I've kind of always admired what Northern California has done because of Digital Underground and some of the sessions that I've seen and I've witnessed.
Yeah, no, most definitely, man. And I've seen that like within like the emulation of your career too, in that sense, you know, from street performing to like mixing and mastering to producing to engineering to even making music too. So like what you got like from your family too, in that sense, it kind of came to you. And you know, just seeing your hard work and your dedication, because you've done this since the age of 16. So like being that person of all trades and just, you know, working hard as like an artist, how did you manage to maintain that longevity to your entertainment career for that long period of time? And what would be some great advice that you would give to any like aspiring artists or people that want to follow within your footsteps?
Um, That's a good one. That's like a very loaded one. I think that and I appreciate that you see the success in that, because I'm not going to have a typical success story, quote unquote, at least right now, as far as like from the commercial eye, right? I've valued independence. When I decided to go to college, I wanted to go to NYU, and I felt like I start my own label at age 16. I'm like, if I start my own label, my mom planted this in my mind. She's like, start your own label. Don't marginalize yourself as like all the rappers are doing right now. Become your own boss. And so, NYU T School of Arts was like a super high level goal. And it was a little bizarre because I had barely a 2.9. I think a lot of my profile would help me because I didn't have a super high GPA. I couldn't really compete, and getting that full ride at UC Berkeley. But I think my profile did it because, I was heavily engaged with the community. You could see the backstory and what I was doing and what I intended on doing. And then my test scores were pretty competitive as well. But I think just to kind of double back on what you're saying, I think a lot of this is just kind of written, and you just have to pay close attention to what your purpose is. For me, I've always known that it was that my passion at least led me towards music. I can't live without it, you know what I'm saying? So I couldn't ignore it if I wanted to, and I've tried. Um, but I think, currently for me right now, I have a life coach. I've done therapy. So I'm all for each dimension of wellness, whether it's mental health, it's environmental health, and wellness, fitness, all these different aspects, right? That maintain what I'm doing right now. It's crazy. My schedule is blocked out. Um, and I manage by having that foresight of what my objectives are going to be. But I'd say over the past 10 years, it's just been my love for the art that's really blessed me the most. I'd say I'm in a very valuable position. I saw like somebody comment in my on Wonder Why. They're like, nigga, you not no damn Jay-Z or no Kanye. And meanwhile, people shitting on Kanye right now. It's just interesting, you know what I'm saying? But I'm like, why shouldn't I aspire? And even more so, my position is distinctively different from a Kanye story. College dropout, graduation, beautiful records. You see the plight of Jay, where he was in his reasonable doubt all the way throughout his timeline. And I'm quite sure that from my path and my story is completely distinct. And I know that like, you know, like sidebar, my mom has a nonprofit organization. I work very closely with her, on the side as well. I do a lot. And so with that in mind, like, I know that these people that they're critiquing about who I say I would like to be, or how sometimes I do feel like I'm Jay, sometimes I feel like I'm Ye, because I speak my mind. I think that they would admire my story as well. And there are things that I've done that the average artist or rapper will just have to witness, like I would have to witness. Like I just can never emulate anything Jay has ever done. You know what I'm saying? So there's a certain distinct level of appreciation, but also inspiration, right? And that's the fine line. Um, but I'd say my imagination has most definitely kept me in the groove and the drive. I know those are pretty like strong cliches. Um, but I think for sure, be intentional, you find your intention. Why are you here? Like you determine that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think a purpose is important too in finding like what's needed to go on to a good career path and all that. Like I know with Jay-Z, like as you mentioned, like he started like within his Reasonable Doubt era, but even before that, like just more so like a back history, he used to like rap with Jazzo and had like the whole like Hawaiian punch song and all that, which him and him and Jazzo, like they had a unique relationship, and Jay was even like rapping like differently too back then. Like it was like more so like DOS effects type style and all that. And seeing that effect grow from that to what he's doing right now with Duce, with owning like a lot of like platforms like Rock Nation Sports. It's interesting too. And aside like with what's going on, Ye is doing bigger and better things too. And it's even like evident like with what he had accomplished, him being a billionaire, even though unfortunately he lost that mark due to the whole anti-Semitism situation. You can't deny like what he's doing right now. And I give props to people for even like taking their career to like the next level, whether it's staying down and grinding hard as much as you can, like within all aspects, or just investing into other opportunities, like even Chameleonaire, with the whole like Lyft investment and
Yeah.
all these other investments after like riding dirty and all that.
Mhm.
It's
And
amazing to see. That's
Burner as well, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, most definitely, man. I don't know if you've watched like No Jumper by any chance, like the like social media like platform and all that.
Yeah, I do. I pay attention to
Yeah.
Adam. Mhm.
Yeah. So like with what's going on recently, just to skip over this other question, there has been like a lot of like racial tensions lately between blacks and Hispanics, especially in LA after Tyga's release of I Caramba, and it had like like people within Mexican origins and other like Hispanic origins, get upset and enraged about it. And they spoke about it like on other platforms, including No Jumper 2, where it had like some issues between staff and other people. And, it's even evident in terms of like cultural appropriation, systemic racism, and much more. Although you're from Northern California in that sense too, like what are your thoughts on these situations going on? And do you feel that the whole like racial tension is much deeper than what's perceived in terms of expectations and so forth, like culturally?
I think it reflects a lot about where we are with media. I think that you know we're at such a vulnerable point as people, across the board, of protecting our identity, protecting what we represent. It doesn't matter if you're LGBTQ or you're a black man or you're a black woman or you're brown man or you're brown woman. I think that a lot of our backs are on the wall. And so like what we have left is to protect our pride and what our names and our heritage, and so I think it becomes especially with the internet, it becomes like an ego thing for sure. And then on across the board, right? But I think the deeper thing, like I personally do not understand the tension between black and brown. We're of the same. We've encountered the same level of exploitation, just in different forms. Some could argue more or less. Go ahead. I mean, that's up for debate, but that's not really what I'm debating right now. But I do think that like we've been stronger together, throughout the history of time, and the late 19th or the late 20th century, when I mean, we're talking civil rights, like we were just stronger. Even our Asian community, when we were linked up the Black Panthers, and had that kind of relationship, I think that things were much more sustainable until we got to this point, which it's hard to blame the current moment. It's hard to blame people in the now because of what's been traced in the past. And so I guess like it's it's a challenging one, I think that there's a lot of mending, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma in what we're talking about here. And so that's a lot of individual work. That's a lot of like, that's a family institution work. We have a lot of families that are broken in our generation. I'm talking like the 90s, early 2000s. So there's just so many different things at play that create where we are right now that it's hard to put it just on like race. But we're all kind of pit against each other, and that's what I think social media has done right now. It's
Yeah.
put us all
Yeah.
in a position to kind of do this and not look like what's happening right now.
Yeah. I definitely know what you mean. And, I've even noticed it too with, radio platforms, like even speaking on this issue too. And, music being portrayed, with YG, his song, like Meet the Flockers, it even had a lot of like controversy back then. And then this other LA artist, Swifty Blue, even talking about him not signing to like a black label, like in that sense too, and to follow within his like own culture and all that, while like
Damn.
emulating some of the aspects of black culture and music. So it's kind of interesting too to see. And even like No Jumper speaking on this commentary, even having people like American Cholo, Bozo, Poetic Flacco, and like Duno, like even like talking about these issues, because even in that sense too, like there's a lot of like growing and a lot of like change like needing to be done to kind of like improve like the relations rather than to kind of separate in that sense too. So like I
Mhm.
definitely understand like where it's coming from. And I don't know if it's even like prevalent within Northern California with the tension between blacks and browns, or I don't know if it's more of a Southern California thing.
Nah, like where I grew up, like everyone we didn't know the difference, even from a class level, even from a class level, even white culture blended in, like it was very seamless. Sacramento specifically is such a melting pot that it given the circumstances, especially where you're from, you might what is it? You might omit race. You might be blind to race as a black man in a particular gang, and I know those aspects are divided. You have different gangs that bump heads racially, and especially obviously like in prison environments and stuff. That's a reality. That's going to always be a reality. But I think generally from where I was, my upbringing in multiple schools that I went to and just multiple environments, it's like a family, essentially, unless it's not like if it's on some gang shit, but the heavy distinction from what I'd imagine Southern California, right?
Yeah, no, most definitely. Do you ever feel like that there should be a change, like a change can be made in that sense too, or at least like mitigate like the racial tensions going on for people to understand that this is like a real situation? Or do you feel like there might not be any like form of change at all?
I mean, awareness alone is not going to fix it. I don't like, we're talking about like programming here, like psychological programming, and like a lot of unlearning. Being vulnerable is an important aspect of what we're looking at when it comes to like um, that self-awareness of yourself and your path. These are like individual spiritual paths that people take and choose collectively at times. We're talking about gangs, so it's not really something that I see changing. It'll evolve into different forms. I just focus on more of what I can do. And so, I've done a lot of tutoring. My mom, we have a nonprofit organization. I'm like a program manager. I'm helping students get into college, helping them guiding towards their college application process right now this season. That's like a part of something that I'm doing. And I just use the game that I know, and they call it the hidden curriculum. I use that to foster and nurture the best way I can. And I don't really have time a lot of the times to like address some of these things publicly, because it just takes away from making the little changes. But these are very small incremental changes that you do with the youth, not with people who may already be set in how they feel. And you have to respect where they come from, because this is where they come from. If you're in their shoes, you'd probably be doing the same thing too. So I don't really think nothing has to change. I think I just do what I can. People do what they will, and we just see what happens.
Yeah, no, most definitely, man. We just only have these next couple questions left. But with the West Coast, it's bigger and better than ever. Like there's more platforms nowadays, for more music exposure for West Coast artists. I mean, you have No Jumper, you have Fizzler for the Bay Area. You
Mhm.
also have a day in LA and all that. For Dejan, for more so like within the Los Angeles, with the Los Angeles like rap scene, like underground wise. But like even like more so there's more West Coast artists like popping up now than anywhere else. So with a lot of like rising acts in the West, what are your thoughts on the scene going on there in the West Coast? And do you feel that there should be any improvements for the scene to go bigger, or do you feel like it's fine the way it is?
I think we need more circuits for our Northern Californian artists, and I'm talking about like venues for artists who are at least mid-range level, like for a Briss and like some level of like and even some of the dudes that you mentioned right earlier, I think this is so tied into the gang stuff that it creates a lot of issues, right? And that's part of the reason. There's also, Sacramento is not like a city where everything's open past 10. It's like downtown is shut down, right? So there is no like political opportunity in that space. But from a lens of like my appreciation, yeah, you have No Jumper, you have Thizzler. Shout out to Thizzler. They've published me a few times. And I'm working with them as well, because they are one of the most major publications throughout the country, right? But specifically Northern California. We have like DB by the Bag. We're speaking modern right now. Vince Staples dropped a hard album, right? Dom Kennedy. You have Larry June, Simba, who's just like impeccable in his craft, right? And then even I think his name is La Russell. Right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then I mean, you
Yeah.
have Guapdad 4000. You have Buddy. You have
Man.
Jason Cash, Boogie. I mean, more so with the gang related stuff. You have RJ. You have Ruchi, Aschike. You have Capello. You have Haiti Baby.
Yeah, Draco.
Phil. Yeah.
Draco. I think that we for sure have established, YG as well, right? Still doing what he's doing. And I think that we have kept it on our backs for sure. But I think more unity obviously would create a better route. But I think more competition. I think if we were a little bit more competitive from a friendly sport of keeping each other on our toes, for sure. That's where I kind of think I come in for sure. Because, I appreciate all of these artists. I think, a lot of the artists, Tyler, the creator as well, right? I think lived in Elk Grove for some time, right? Which is Sacramento, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
There's tons of appreciation that I have for the West Coast artists right now.
Yeah, most definitely. And in my opinion too, I do feel like a lot of like other like contributors and like tastemakers actually helped out within the whole like West Coast scene. I mean, Empire, like shout out to Ghazi, has helped like a lot of people like throughout the West Coast and the Midwest in a way too. R Baron for like the whole like Los Angeles like music scene and all that, with a lot of like LA rappers like Shoreline and Remble and Blueface and all these other people too. And then also like maybe like indirectly, but Vlad kind of helped out like some of the people like in the West Coast too for a little bit, and like No Jumper too, and like even like some of the radio stations and like some of the bloggers too. Like I do feel like the West Coast has shined like a light on who's like popping up from like every other area and all that, whether it would be like from Redding, California, or whether it would be like from San Diego. So it's just amazing to see in that sense too. And I do feel like like just with the proper like networks and channels and better A&Rs to have an ear to like listen to West Coast music, like I do feel like the West can regain like what it was like since the 2000s and all that, because I know like down south like they're still like popping up like every other time, like every down south artist is making a wave. Like you have like some Midwest is like sort of making it out too with Detroit and Chicago, and then the East Coast is kind of like
those kind of making a comeback right now, bubbling up, especially with the drill.
Most definitely.
The South is killing it though.
Most definitely. I know that you've talked a lot about like education for a bit too. This is like kind of like an added question, but tell me more about like how do you feel about the importance of an education to go further in that sense too? Like since you're very like well spoken on with an education, do you feel like even like a college degree is worth it nowadays too, or should people like be more focused like within like the trades, or at least just attaining a high school like diploma in that sense?
Yeah, so currently I'm in project management, and that's because I decided to go back to school after the BA. And get like an additional associate's degree, which is kind of backwards, but I think if you're intentional about what skill set you need, I'd go to a trade. If it just so happens that you want to be a doctor, take that route and go down that whole path of a BA, do your graduate study. Now, outside of that, I think spiritual path wise, because my path was just kind of carved out. It was just, I wouldn't recommend that to everyone, because it was a lot of trauma going to UCLA. It was, I had no support system coming from Sacramento, no support system whatsoever. And so I think I just wouldn't wish that on anyone, what I had to go through. Now, if you are for that adventure and you trust your process, I recommend it. Education, I think, has made me, I'd say, a lot more self-sufficient. I've always made it a thing to where it's like, paying mortgage won't be based on me selling records. Like and even more so just from being able to put the right people in order, reading my contracts, and me actually being able to read my contracts, right? Me being able to ask questions. I think that's like my biggest gift, right? That general curiosity, they always say what, like, don't let school get in the way of your education. So I'm all for that, but I'm not for like bashing school. I'm not for like, you don't need to get a degree. I just feel like that's a cop out. I feel like if you're afraid and that's the reason why you're not going to school, then you're not doing yourself justice. But if you feel like your path is a very particular direction, like, I admire that even more, because I think that takes a lot more courage to create a path that's not like prescribed for you. And I think essentially that's what I've done. But yeah, 100%. There is tons of value, and I'm always a student. I'm a student when it comes to being in the studio. I constantly read. I'm reading every month. Keeping myself fit and sharp. And I think that's a testament to my college experience, because really, it's not the paper that is valuable. I mean, yeah, if I show this around in the job employment market, they're like, whoa, they see it.
Yeah.
But it's the experience. Like, I put myself through a lot of shit to get that degree. Talk about the statistics, my last note of my mom looking at things, but we barely knew what it would look like for me to get to the school, but to actually complete the degree. And we talk about retention rates, where I'm like, out of 4% African Americans at UCLA, what I had to do to beat the odds of getting that degree is what made me as resilient as I am. When I look at the industry, it's like, y'all can't do shit. There's nothing. I have a certain level of confidence about myself when I speak to execs, when I speak to people who may be trying to scam me, or even just knowing my worth. Like, I would never be put in a position to where someone would give me a contract and say, here goes 100,000 for this percentage, and we want this. And I'm like, no, I make that by myself, so let's talk about more value here, and really exchanging that. I think college education has done that for me, for sure. And just kind of having that independence and self-sufficiency. So I would recommend it generally, but I wouldn't recommend it has to be like Ivy League or anything,
Yeah, no, most definitely, man. So aside from your upcoming album that's about to be released soon, what other stuff do you have in terms of any other like creative project and so forth?
Yeah. So this Reap What You Sow is dropping the wintertime for sure, and it's aiming for like mid-February. So I do have a timeline to release tons of visuals. From there, I just want to tap into the single market, and just kind of like learn a little bit more about myself, get some more experience before I do another project. But I think this one has really established something. So I really want to get this out as much as possible. Finding the right people to push it with me, creating the right team. And I have somewhat of a team right now, but I think, that'll pretty much be my goal, so I can get it to a wider audience. And making sure each song has its time to shine. So obviously Wonder Why I was able to get some space. Likely is kind of what I'm pushing right now. And then I have a few other ones like month by month that I really want to give light to. So, people could kind of just expect way more singles, maybe even if it's copacetic with the features, it might be a few people that I would like to work with. And then from there, like, just tons of visuals,